Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, we have a guest that I am so excited to have on this show, an author that has written many, many garden books and even contributed as senior editor to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th editions of the Sunset Western Garden Book, which I know that many of us have in our libraries at home. I'm really excited. So here, let me tell you a little bit about Lance. Lance Walheim graduated from University of California, Berkeley in 1975 with a BA in botany, and he continued his education in horticulture. He has authored or contributed to over 30 gardening books. And again, he was staff editor at Sunset Magazine from 1985 to 1990. And he contributed to the last 2 editions of the Southern Living Gardening book. His other books are things like Citrus and the Natural Rose Gardener. He has Roses for Dummies, Landscaping for Dummies, Lawn Care for Dummies. And his recent publications are Home Landscaping California Region. And Lance has served as garden expert for BioAdvanced lawn and garden products. You see them on the end caps at Lowe's. They're in those blue bottles. For the last 20 years, and he's regularly on local and national TV and radio shows, just like this one. And for the last 15 years, he's helped educate the public on the threat of invasive species, including being on the ground in Detroit and other Midwestern cities to help combat the emerald ash borer. Lance was also partner in California Citrus Specialties, packers and shippers of specialty citrus. Him and his wife Laura live on a 17-acre citrus ranch. So as you can see, we have a lot to learn from Lance today, and I'm so excited to have him here. We are going to talk about a couple different things. We talk about how planting trees can help conserve energy and things that you need to really consider when you're putting trees in your yard. And I'm telling you, there were things that I hadn't even considered. So I learned a lot from this episode. We also talk about roses because he's obviously written a book on roses, and we learn what his favorites are. We learn some really good tips and tricks on how to care for them, and I can't wait to get in it. I also brought in my good buddy Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants because he obviously knows a lot about trees, and I thought it would be really fun to have the three of us have a fun chat. So that's what we're going to do today on this episode 49 of Gardening Utah. Thank you for listening, and you know what's next? The tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is change your lawnmower blade to the top setting. Now, what am I talking about? Look, mowing your lawn at the highest setting will promote deep roots, avoid grub damage, and it can crowd out weeds. Now, some people think, if I'm going to go out and mow my lawn, I want to mow it as short as possible to save time into the future. Or some people really just want their lawn to look like a golf course fairway. But unfortunately, this is not practical, especially for Utah. And it's not practical for the average homeowner because golf course fairways, listen, those are mowed 3 times a week with a very sharp and reel mower. They're irrigated daily during the summer, and trying to make your lawn look like a golf course is not practical for this area. And also, trying to mow your lawn at a height at less than 3 inches is actually stressful for your lawn and may result in the need to apply more insecticides and herbicides. So most lawnmowers have an adjustment that allows you to change the mowing height between 2 and 4 inches. So what height do you mow at? Well, the highest setting your mower will allow. Now, Mowing High provides some very valuable services to your lawn. First of all, it makes the scalping, which kind of is like turf damage from mowing too short, much less likely to happen. It allows you to clip about 30% of the leaf blade each time you mow, assuming you mow consistently, because you really never want to cut off more than a third of the blade at any given time. It also promotes the establishment of a larger root system, which is a lot more drought tolerant. It provides broadleaf weed and crabgrass control by shading the soil surface, because obviously weed seeds need light in order to germinate. And it establishes a grub-tolerant lawn because the root mass grows larger. And the weed and grub control provided by Mowing High means you can use less pesticide on your lawn. And in fact, if you combine Mowing High with modest applications of fertilizer, you may not need to use any pesticides or herbicide for weeds or insecticide for grubs on your lawn. Now, if you have not been Mowing High, you may need to do this for about a year to really turn it around and establish a healthy lawn before you stop using pesticides. So, be inspired. Go out there, lift that mower blade, mow on the highest height for the healthiest lawn. That's my tip of the week.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
Brought to you by The Advocates.
If you're in an accident,
You deserve an advocate.
call 801-355-5550
Or visit UtahAdvocates.com.
never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode.
The Gardening Utah Podcast
With Jana Francis.
on 860 KKAT.
How about a little contest, everyone? Listen up. If you have not entered to win the 4x8 raised garden box from Q&R Box Gardens, you must enter to win. Just visit 860kkat.com and click the contest button and enter to win. It's that simple. So good luck to you. They're amazing. And by the way, if you want to buy a raised garden box, because you probably are going to want more than one, you can use the code JANA15 with Q&R Box Gardens to get 15% off. How do you like that? Also, one more coupon code while we're talking coupon codes. We all know that so many of you love to shop at Progressive Plants with our good buddy Cameron, who, by the way, is joining me later for this show. You can use the code JANA20 right now. I don't know how long this is going to last. Cameron was feeling generous one day, and you can literally get 20% off at progressiveplants.com. So I'm a huge fan. Rent your golf cart, go on out there, drive around. It's amazing. By the way, what you see there might not be necessarily what's for sale, because a lot of times they're holding big lots of things for, upcoming projects, but all their inventory is online, and it's really just fun to go see it in person too. It's super relaxing to just drive around on the golf cart and see what is going on. All the beautiful, beautiful ornamental. Well, listen, it is grow time, folks. We are at premier time to get outside and grow. It's the perfect time to get outside and garden. The weather is warm, the soil is ripe, and the cold is mostly behind us, depending on what part of Utah you live in. And you don't want to be stuck wishing you had grown the best garden this summer, right? So just a reminder, get out there and grow. Even if you didn't start your seeds indoors, I only do about half and half. Go to your local garden center, pick up some things that inspire you, things that you think you'll enjoy, whether it's flowers or whether it is vegetables or fruit. Seriously, you will never regret planting something in the ground and watching it grow all year. So get out there and grow this weekend. And binge listen to Gardening Utah while you're at it, okay? This is episode 49, if you can believe that. And there is a lot of amazing content that you can go back to and have a listen to. Okay, we will be right back after this break. We're going to have Lance Walheim, garden expert for BioAdvanced, with us. I cannot wait. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and I am so excited right now because I have amazing guests today. So I have Cameron Alcott with me from progressiveplants.com, whom you all know and love very well. And I also have Lance Walheim, garden expert for BioAdvanced. Lance, thank you so much for joining us here on Gardening Utah.
Well, thanks for having me, Jan. It's great to be here.
So why don't you tell our listeners, you have just this incredible story and even a connection to Utah. Tell us all about you.
Well, I got my degree in botany from the University of California, Berkeley, and I got really lucky when I got out of school. I fell into a great group of people who were writing gardening books and kind of took on horticulture from that end, and we did. It was a group called Horticultural Associates. We were doing books which are now published by Meredith. We did the first 20 of those, and then we worked for several other publishers over the years. And so that was a lot of fun. It was a great education, and it really taught me how to research subjects and gave me a great introduction to all the great things that are horticulture. Then I went to work as a staff member at Sunset Magazine. And there I specialized in water conservation, and I also covered the Intermountain West. So I spent a lot of time in Salt Lake City, worked with the famous guys like Larry Sagers and Dwayne Hatch and Dick Hildreth. So I really got to know the area that way. And then from then, I continued to work Sunset as freelance. We moved to Exeter, California, and we planted a specialty citrus grove where we grow, about 15 different varieties of citrus, from blood oranges to Meyer lemons to different mandarins and oddball stuff. And so we did that. And I had a company called California Citrus Specialties. And at the same time, I was working on the Sunset Western Garden book, and I was a senior editor of that for the last 4 editions. And then I finally was hired by BioAdvanced to be their garden expert, and I've been working with them for, over 20 years now, while keeping my citrus growth. So I've had an incredible career, and I've just a lot of great luck and worked with so many fantastic people. As you know, garden and nursery people are just a great bunch. So it's been a great ride.
I really feel like an underachiever right now.
You're still a young guy, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, this is amazing. I'm so honored to be speaking to you. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about planting trees to conserve energy, those kind of things. I wanted to quickly ask you about Sunset Magazine, though. Give me a little bit of the history on that, because I got that for many years. And of course, I have the Western, Gardens book on my coffee table upstairs. So tell me a little bit more about that story.
Well, it's interesting because the person that I first started working for when I got out of college was a gentleman named Walter Doty. And Walter was the editor of Sunset Magazine for, over 20 years, and really kind of built it into what it is today, or what it was today. And so it was only natural then when our book business was kind of slow, and I had 2 kids, I needed a regular job. And so freelance wasn't going to work out. So I went to work for Sunset Magazine, and I was there on staff for about 5 years. And that's when I covered Salt Lake City. And I mean, it was just a great experience because I got to work on the Western Garden book. I really got to know the climates of the West, all the different climates of the West. So it was fun. And then the Sunset was bought out by Time Warner. And that's when we moved down here to get into citrus. But I continued to work with Kathy Brenzel, who's a garden expert there. And while we moved down here to Exeter. And, then recently, Sunset was purchased by an investment group, and things have kind of gone crazy. I'm not sure exactly but all the people that I knew when I worked there are now gone. We used to have this great headquarters in Menlo Park that was designed by Tommy Church, famous landscape architect. And they moved everybody from there over to Oakland. And then they moved him into a different office. And last I heard, the magazine isn't being published. They do have an online presence at sunset.com, but the great magazine that we all think about and grew up with doesn't seem to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also hurts the Western Garden book as well, because we would update the Western Garden book every 5 to 10 years. And now it's got a kind of an uncertain future. I don't know where it actually stands. And it's past time for a new revision. So, if you're a gardener in the West, the Western Garden Book is your Bible. We all know that the USDA zones don't work in the Western United States. And that's why you need the Sunset Western Garden Book zones, so you can really find out what plants grow where. So
didn't we just have an episode about that?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, it's hard to believe when the USDA zones can cover, I think it's zone 8 covers like Phoenix, San Francisco, and Seattle, all those different climates in one USDA zone. So works better back east, but not really well out here.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing that I really appreciated about, like the Western Garden Books and whatnot, was the amount of regional knowledge that was in it, because I think that's really important. And I think we were talking last week or a couple of weeks ago, like with the national marketing that a lot of companies do now, and even with like the USDA zones or whatnot, it doesn't necessarily translate very well, because it's not like a blanket like, oh, everything zone 4 is going to work here. It's like you have like these little microclimates and soil pH and those types of things. And I think that's where that regional knowledge is so important if people want to be successful in gardening out here. And because this is a challenging environment. I mean, we get really hot, really cold. Not a whole lot of humidity a lot of times, unless you're along the coastlines. And a lot of people don't realize that, like, it's not just, plants aren't just plug and play. Like, they need to be in an environment that they are adapted to. And that's what I love the most about like the Sunset Gardens and like Western Gardens book and whatnot. It was like required reading for me as a kid.
Well, that's exactly right. And the things that you mentioned are things that don't even enter into the USDA zones, things like humidity and winter cold and air, lack of water. The USDA zones are just winter hardiness. So they don't care. They don't really take into effect a lot of things that affect us dramatically. And the other thing that was so great about the Western Garden Book, or is so great, is that we did use regional people. And that's how, I got to work with people like Larry and Dwayne and Dick Hildreth and the people at the Arboretum there in Salt Lake, because, all gardening is local, and you can only really get a feel for it if you talk to the experts or you spend time there. And of course, I couldn't be in every place at one time, but that we just had fantastic people that were always there, that appreciated the book and that would help us.
Yeah. The nice thing about here in Utah, it seems like over like the last 2 or 3 years, though, I mean, we've seen a huge increase in resources for that local knowledge. I mean, like the college here, like the Utah State University, like their extension services have been absolutely fantastic. I mean, you've got people like Sheridan Mood Hansen. I think she runs the Kaysville Botanical Gardens for USU, and JD Gunnell, and you got, of course, Liz Hamilton, Alex Grover. I mean, there's a lot of people here now that are great resources for that type of thing that I don't remember really existing before 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I did some homework just to see what was new and coming up, and some of the stuff that's available from the cooperative extension there and Utah State University, and specifically to some of the things we're going to talk about, are really phenomenal. So, you just can't say enough about the cooperative extension and the support that they give to gardens, and then the public gardens and the plant societies like the Rose Society. I mean, there's just a lot of great information out there.
Absolutely. USU does such an incredible job. So many resources and great stuff they're always plugging out. So we wanted to talk a little bit about planting trees to conserve energy. So let's jump into that for a minute before the next break. So how can we use trees to conserve energy? Well, trees are the hardest working part of our landscape. I mean, think about what they do for us. They beautify our neighborhoods and our homes. They provide wildlife habitat. They clean the air. They prevent erosion. They increase our property values. But the other thing they do, if we're just talking about shade, is that they can really reduce the amount of summer air conditioning that we need, or even some of the winter heating that we need, by properly positioning them around your home. And I think this is a good time to say that if you Google energy conservation with trees for Utah, you'll get a great bulletin from the Utah State University Forestry Department that gives you all the information that we can talk about. And it's not just about putting the trees in the right place. It's about making sure that you do a good job in selecting the proper tree. I mean, face it, when you plant a tree, this is something you're going to live with for a long time.
So if you make a mistake, you're going to live with those mistakes for a long time. But, the basic, when it comes down to, is if you use deciduous trees on the east and the west sides of your home, deciduous so that the sun can get through in winter and warm the house, and you can shade windows and air conditions and paved areas like that, you can really reduce and cool the area around your home. Again, the east and the west facing sides of the home are most important. We generally don't like to shade too much on the south side because that's where the winter sun is going to come in, and you want that sun to kind of warm the house. So that's important. So, and there's a lot of different things you want to think about. When you place them, obviously, we don't want to plant anything under power lines. That's a major cause of power outages when trees, interfere with power lines. If you live in an area where there's a fire threat, then you've got to think twice about how close you put these trees to your home. In general, you want to put them, and again, this bulletin that we have does a great job of kind of showing how to position them around your house. But if you're in a fire area, you got to think twice about things. But those are important aspects as well. So there's a lot of things you've got to consider, and I think that's what people really need to think. But they can do a great job with, and they don't have to be big trees, and they don't have to be real close to your house. Generally, you like 25 to 35 feet high, and just put them in the right place. And you can use more than one if you want. Get those windows, the air conditioner, get those places shaded.
Okay, we have so much more to learn from you, Lance. We will be right back after this on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and I've got Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants with me today. And also our guest, we are talking with garden expert for BioAdvanced, Lance Walheim, and we are talking about how to plant trees to conserve energy. And just before this last break, we were discussing a fire hazard with trees. So Cameron, what was your thought on that?
Well, it was kind of interesting because I think it was last year or the year before, up in Summit County, they actually enacted some planting rules of where you can put certain trees in relation to that structures in the yard. I think they might have even had some requirements on what varieties of trees that you could do as well. I don't remember for sure because I don't design up in Park City hardly ever. So I didn't really get into it very much. But I mean, fire hazards are a thing, especially, since we're dealing with the drought situation that we have here, and how that, if you don't plan appropriately, you could cause a lot more damage that doesn't need to occur. So it's just kind of interesting how we've changed our mindset over the last couple of years of where we kind of put trees and being very mindful of where we plant these things.
Absolutely. I'm in California, and everybody knows what we've been going through here and what we face this summer. And if you're concerned at all, then talk to your local government officials or something and see if there are rules, because you definitely want to keep that safe buffer between you and any vegetation that might catch fire and threaten your home. You want a defensible space around your home. And so there's a lot of great information out there. And so that's one of the reasons is, as great as we want to plant trees, we've got to know that they can be a challenge with the way that the weather has been going lately. Some trees are better than others. Maybe the trees is not the appropriate choice for that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the other thing that you could even take into consideration as well is if you're planting trees around your house, because we were talking a little bit earlier about reducing energy costs for air conditioning and heating and those types of things, the shape and the canopy of the tree and how it extends over the house.
Right.
But how far away the trunk is, because my mom's house, for instance, about 35 years ago, we put some beech trees around her house, and she doesn't turn on the air conditioning until almost July.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's got a pretty tall house. And these beech trees now, I mean, they're a gorgeous tree. I mean, the structure on them is absolutely fantastic. They're one of my favorite trees.
The elephant-looking trunk. I love the beech tree too.
Yeah.
Well, but you bring up an excellent point. I mean, it's too easy sometimes when we walk into a nursery or a garden center and we see a tree in bloom, or we see some fall color, and we say, that's the tree I want. That's how you make mistakes. You really do want to do some research about these trees and find out how big they're going to be, how wide they're going to spread, how fast they're going to grow. You don't want to get them too close to any type of paving. Are they messy? If you plant a messy tree around your patio, you're going to hate it for a long time. So these are, and then how well does it adapt to the position you're putting it in? Is it going to be able to withstand the dryness and the drought that we've going through? Is it going to get enough water? Is the drainage okay? And then once you've got all these things answered, then you can really start making decisions about the ornamental characters of the tree. I hate to say it, but it's almost, in some cases, when it comes to the tree, it's the least important thing, even though that's what we want most often. And again, I just got to say that, again, you talked about the resources. The Salt Lake City urban forester's got a great list of trees, and the Cooperative Extension, and then I guess the Tree Utah. So there's a lot of great sources of information that can help you choose the right tree and then put it in the right place. Right tree in the right place. That's important.
Yeah, it seems like a mantra that we've had around here for the last couple of years as well.
Right.
And one thing I've noticed that a lot of people that are perhaps new to landscaping or have a new build, or they're just going to put in a yard, the thought is, what's the fastest growing tree possible? But that's not always the best idea, is it, Lance?
No, it's not, because a lot of the fastest growing trees are the ones that are going to give you problems later on with weak limbs and disease problems. But, there are some things that you can do. You can, put in what I like to call almost temporary trees and mix them in with some longer lived trees. And as those fast growing trees reach maturity, you can take them out and let the other ones kind of take over. But you're right. In most cases, fast-growing trees are not the best long-term solution. When you think about all the poplars and all these things that just grow so fast and give you immediate shade, but they're going to give you long-term problems as well.
Yeah, I think there was a lady that I answered a question for on our Facebook group, and she was like, "Hey, what kind of tree can I plant that my kids can climb in the next few years?" And I was like, tree that you would have needed to plant about 30 years ago.
There you go.
Nothing about, fast growing. Like, even if you tried to grow like a fast growing tree, you're really just asking for trouble. In my old neighborhood that I used to live in, I mean, they were like, I'm guessing they were probably Lombardy poplars that were probably planted in the early 90s. And I mean, they were like tall, but then they just started dying off one by one by one. And they were next to houses. And poplar trees are kind of scary because once their trunk gets a little weak, they just snap like twigs in the wind.
Yeah, absolutely weak-winded. And and a lot of the fast-growing trees also have very aggressive roots, which can cause you problems with paving or with sewer lines or with septic systems. So, and those are the things you got to find out. And the other thing, and it's, I mentioned to you guys that I'd listened to a podcast from you from a couple of weeks ago where you talked about some interesting trees to grow. When we tend to get into this little niche of, every, big box store that you go in has their 10 trees. And we need diversity in our urban landscape, especially with some of the things that are going on with the invasive pests like the emerald ash borer back east, which is destroying the ash trees. And so we need if you're really interested in trees and you love trees, search out some of these more unusual ones like the ones you were talking about, and let's get a diversity so when something comes through, we don't get in trouble where we lose a large percentage of our urban landscape.
Yeah, that what you talked about with biodiversity is, really interesting because a couple of years ago, I attended a lecture from one of the professors from North Dakota State, and we was talking about we were talking about Dutch elm disease and the elm trees. And it was just kind of interesting where, like back east, you had like these elm trees, they were gorgeous and then they were huge and they were majestic canopies. And then the Dutch elm disease just came and just wiped everything out.
Yeah.
And so then they replaced them with the ash trees, because they had a similar type of shape. And now you have emerald ash borer, and that's taking out everything because it's over in Colorado now. Like it's almost here in Utah.
Right. It's outside of Denver. I know. I was actually in Detroit, I think in 2005 when it was just starting to break out. And I've been in Chicago a lot. When you fly into Chicago, you just can't believe the number of dead trees. It's just really bad. And then you also mentioned, there's the Japanese beetle. We don't want that one either. And out in California, we have the Asian citrus psyllid and citrus greening, which threatens the entire citrus industry in the country. So, the world's getting smaller and we need to have that diversity, and we have to make sure we follow any rules when we're moving plants around.
Yeah. I just thought it was kind of ironic that even with the emerald ash borer and stuff, the tree that's going to probably end up replacing the ash trees again as your quintessential street tree are elms again, that are all resistant to the Dutch elm disease now.
It's amazing how things come and go around. And, it's not just the trees in the landscape as well. Those are hugely important native trees, and it affects the wildlife. And, we don't it even threatens our baseball bats because that's what a lot of the baseball bats are made out of, is ash. So, that's not a good situation. Yeah,
so baseball bats are made out of the ash tree?
Most of them are, yeah. Obviously we've got metal bats and there are some substitute, but the majority of the Louisville sluggers and things are made out of ash.
Oh, wow.
That is really interesting. I don't know why I'm so fascinated by that. Okay, well, we have so much more to learn right after this break. We'll be back right after this on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me today is Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants, and we're talking with Lance Walheim, who is a garden expert for BioAdvanced, an author, a specialty citrus grower, and you know what? One of the books that he authored is called Roses for Dummies, and I just thought it would be so fun to talk about roses because I'm obsessed, Cameron's obsessed, and all of you listeners to Gardening Utah, we talk about roses a lot. So, Lance, give us the scoop.
Well, one of the things I was lucky with, I got work again with a group on a bunch of the Dummies books. And the Dummies books were really fun because they really let you kind of take a different approach to gardening and have some fun with the subject. And so at first I was a little intimidated, but then I really found it kind of liberating to be able to write that way. And so I did Roses for Dummies, Lawn Care for Dummies, and Gardening for Dummies. And it was really fun. I've worked on many rose books over the years. And so those have always been a favorite plant of mine. I love the whole landscape side of the new generation of roses that's coming out that are effective in the landscape, much better than, what we've had in the past when, it used to be you wanted those long stemmed hybrid teas and fragrance was important. Landscape quality wasn't. Now you saw the roses all lined up on the side of the house as you drove through the neighborhood. Now these are, become backbone of the landscape with these new varieties. So it's really been a lot of fun to see what's happened.
Well, Lance, I actually have some BioAdvanced 3-in-1, the systemic rose care on the way, because those are just pellets that you can put around the base, correct?
Yeah, that's the all-in-one rose and flower care, and that prevents, you don't have to spray it. You sprinkle it. You can either sprinkle it. There's also a liquid formulation around the base of the plant. It's absorbed up into the plants, and it protects them from diseases like black spot and powdery mildew, as well as insect pests like aphids, and plus it feeds. weeds. So that's really was one of our first products that came out and really endeared us to the rose community, because it really not only we have these great new varieties, but we also have much simpler products to use. Because, even though we talk about all these great roses that are coming out, the knockout roses and the drift roses and the disease resistance they have, well, they're disease resistant, but they're not necessarily disease immune. So, I mean, even some of the toughest roses can get some disease, and they also get pests. So you have that option if you want to. We also have the Natria line, which offers some alternative and organic control methods for rose problems. So if people go to BioAdvanced.com, they can really see the entire list of products that we have. Plus, we have a solution finder that helps you identify what the problems are and give you a solution for that problem.
Oh yeah, because one of the more common problems that we see here at this time of year, especially, is aphids. Because we're like, it's a little bit cooler out here right now. It's not like super hot. And then right after that, it seems like the spider mites really hit us hard, especially if we are like warm and hot and it gets dusty out here. Like, it just seems like it's like a haven for spider mites. And I think that's what the majority of the problems that we have here are. And it'd be kind of great if you kind of inform the listeners here of like how to kind of combat those two things.
Well, I mean, with aphids, I know that they can be problematic, but there are some pretty, simple solutions for aphids. In fact, in my experience out here in the garden, if you leave the aphids alone for a couple of weeks, usually they're followed by the ladybugs, and they'll clean them up pretty good. So, it's really important whenever you're obviously using any type of product like this, you read and follow the label instructions, but you can also learn a lot by knowing the life cycle of the insect pests. And spider mites are the perfect example. Now, that all-in-one rose and flower food doesn't control spider mites. We have other products that'll do that, but you're exactly right. If the plants aren't watered properly, when it gets dry and they get dusty, that's when you're going to start seeing spider mite damage. A lot of times, if you can just keep those plants hosed off, that's going to reduce a lot of your problems as well. But once they get started, boy, those spider mites are tough to control.
Yeah, no, we struggle with them here at our nursery a lot of times for sure. So, but I'm glad that you brought that up about like the aphid life cycle, because like that's one of the things that, when I was running the growing operation here, I would just kind of let them go. And I was okay with it. I mean, I had what I call like acceptable thresholds,
right.
If they weren't like disfiguring the plant, to make it to where it was not going to be sellable, then I would, treat chemically if I needed to. But
that's
right,
good integrated pest management. That's exactly what you're doing, and that's what all gardeners should do. When we need something, we have the tools and the insecticides or the pesticides that we can use if things get out of control, and they do. We know that, but it also helps to know when to spray, how to spray, and make sure that you're getting the best results from the products that you use. And a lot of that information is on the label.
Yep.
Yeah. Here in Utah, roses are just now starting to bud out depending on the variety. I know that my hybrid teas, I've gotten my first couple blooms. And then my shrub roses are just about ready to explode. In fact, my shrub roses, Cameron, are from your place from many years ago, and they're gorgeous. And I find that for some reason, I find a lot less pests on my shrub roses than I do on my hybrid teas. Is there, do hybrid teas just generally have a little bit more issues than maybe grandifloras or, some of the other varieties?
Well, I think especially with the shrub roses, I mean, which varieties do you have? Do you have knockouts or what do you have?
I'm not entirely sure. They're white.
Yeah. Well, the thing about shrub roses is that they're, when they used to breed the roses for the long stem flowers, the disease resistance or the garden performance really wasn't considered as much. Now gardeners have changed. They want the easy to care roses. And when these breeders look at these new varieties, they look at disease resistance and pest resistance. So those shrubs are, better garden plants. I mean, you don't have to, do all the things you have to do with a hybrid tea. And the knockout roses, which you can overtake in the the country pretty much are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of great old shrub roses that make fantastic landscape plants, and these are plants which you can mix into your perennial borders. They can carry your flower borders when everything else is kind of going in and out of bloom. I just love to use those in the landscape. One of my favorite roses out here is Iceberg, which is a floribunda, and white floribunda is very popular here. And I'll tell you, it just makes everything look better because it just has that light, clear white color. I like to mix in plants with different textures like ornamental grasses. I like to cover up the bases with spreading plants. So there's a bunch of rules that I always like to follow when I'm leasing roses in the landscape. And they just can be tremendously colorful. I think they're so colorful, you have to be careful and think about the color theme that you're going to do. I always say, if you don't think about it, you're going to end up in your backyard looking like a box of Crayolas in summer, all melted together. So have a color theme. So,
isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
I definitely find that if there's a red rose somewhere, then you kind of have to have either the hot colors together or the cool colors together.
Right. Yeah, that's just basic good design. But with all the colorful plants, sometimes you don't think about it. You say, I got to have that flower and I got to have that rose, and you put it in. Boy, I just wish I'd gone with a yellow or a white or something else. And there's just so many options. I love single roses. Single roses like Sally Holmes, which is a shrub rose. There's a rose that Weeks Roses has out. It's a red rose. It's called Home Run. I don't know if you've...
Home Run.
Yeah,
I've got that one outside my office.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then and years ago, I always tell everybody, my color theme is keep yellow and orange out of my garden. And then people like Weeks Roses, Tom Caruth at Weeks Roses, started coming up with these roses like Hot Cocoa and these wonderful oranges shades, orange aid, and they're so beautiful in bouquets. I just love those. Even though I love the shrub roses, I've got a big plot of cutting roses over here that we use too. I mean, how can you not have roses and not put them in bouquets and bring them inside?
Absolutely.
No, it's funny because I've been actually really digging on the orange roses lately. Like we picked up one a couple of years ago called Pumpkin Patch that I was in love with that one. It was like these huge orange blooms. And then there was another one that I really like called Livin' Easy. It's one of my
I love Livin' Easy. Yeah.
Right? Is that not the best rose?
Yeah, that is. That was one of the All-American rose selections, I think, from a couple years ago. It has that ruffled petal on it. Is that the one?
It looks a lot like it almost looks like a hybrid tea type rose, but as it starts to open up, but then its orangish color is so vibrant.
Yeah.
That I love to see it in I guess more like a bland background, like a lot of the modern farmhouse style homes that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I love to couple those with hydrangeas because they end up looking so good together because the white of the hydrangea paniculatas just kind of start setting off the roses, especially late in the season. Because the hydrangeas and roses have different bloom times, but late in the season when the roses start firing up again, because like in Utah, most of the shrub roses bloom under 85, 90 degrees for the most part. So as we cool down in September, those if you start using limelights or even little limes or even some of the smaller hydrangea arborescens like Invincibelle or something like that, those they just look so good together.
Yeah, try orangeade. One of my favorite not orangeade, but I mean hot cocoa. It is the most unusual color of orange. It's almost like a chocolate orange, and
I'm gonna Google that right now.
I mix that with the famous cook, the yellow rose. Julia Child, the Floribunda Julia Child, and it has just a wonderful fragrance. Yeah, it's great in bouquets, and we mix it with yellow and other orange roses.
Have you seen Cinco de Mayo?
I have. That's another good one.
It's what it reminds me of, is Cinco de Mayo.
It's very much cool. Like that. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely is.
Sorry, Jana. We took over your show. We're just going to nerd out on roses right now.
I love it. I love it. I was going to say, Lance, what is the biggest mistake that you see people who doing roses? What are the biggest mistakes that they make?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest mistakes is they don't fertilize often. I'm a big fan of fertilizing them. If you want your roses to rebloom, you've got to keep fertilizing them and deadheading them. I recommend every 4 to 6 weeks. I think you got to push that growth to push the flowers. That's my opinion. Next to that, making sure that you water deeply, so that, and then not every day or anything like that, and not overhead water. If you live in an area with black spot, that's a mistake people make too. And, but probably if anything, just, not feeding them often enough, just making sure that they get enough nitrogen.
Yeah. Absolutely. I also find that I'll drive by, see somebody else's rose and I think, oh, that's planted way too deep. Yeah. You got to be careful about planting them too deep. That's for sure. But, a lot of times, in areas like where you guys are, where a lot of these roses are going to need winter protection, it makes things a little bit easier if you plant them a little bit deeper, or at least have them in a sunken hole so that you can water them, but also, easier to pile up that protection you're going to need on them, on the tender types.
Yeah. I've noticed that, I've had the best performance with roses if I actually hold off on any type of pruning, because I usually don't like to prune anytime late in the season. Mm-hmm. I usually, if I'm going to do any pruning, it's for most things is going to be early, around middle to late March around here is when I'll usually prune my roses. Yeah. And I'm not afraid to prune them hard, scary hard.
No, you shouldn't be. And actually that's, the reason why we prune roses like hybrid teas so hard is because the harder you prune them, the thicker stem of the new growth you're going to get is going to be. In other words, if you've ever forgotten to prune your roses, that you get all these weak stemmed flowers kind of falling over. But when you prune them hard, you get strong stems and they're better cut flowers. So absolutely right. I mean, I think that's the right time to prune them. I will do a little deadheading and stuff. And that's the nice thing about the shrub roses is that you can, you can just whack them back with head shears and you're still going to get a great bloom.
They're one of the stuff. Yeah, they're one of the easiest plants to take care of. I mean, people think of roses as being finicky and difficult, and my experience has been the entire opposite. They are the simplest things to deal with.
Yeah. Those are I agree with you. I mean, it's unfortunate. And I think, it's funny because when you read books on roses and things, and the rules that are in some of that have come up over, years and years of growing roses, like you've got to cut it at a 45-degree angle at an outside bud, a quarter of an inch above the bud. That's, it take you a long time. You do a lot of that kind of pruning. And the new shrub roses, my pruning shears are the head shears. I open them up every once in a while for air circulation, but, cut them back and
really
feed
necessary.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Just my philosophy with it is, if you're not uncomfortable cutting your roses that far back, you haven't cut them far back enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. Very true.
And so, for listeners listening, you can check out the 3-in-1 systemic care at BioAdvanced.com. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't believe we're out of time here on this episode. I feel like we could talk all day long and have the most fun conversation. So I'm so grateful that you came to join us today on Gardening Utah, Lance. How can our listeners find you?
You can get at bioadvanced.com is the best way to reach me. And we can do it anytime. I love it. We'll do it more. And if I ever get there, I'll call you guys up.
Absolutely. For sure. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you all next week right here on Gardening Utah.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.
We are supported by ProgressivePlants.com that will thrive in your location. Progressive Plants is passionate about helping homeowners, expert gardeners, novices alike choose the correct plant for your soil. They don't just grow plants, they know plants. Let Progressive Plants help you today. Just go to ProgressivePlants.com and check out their wide selection. You can also go to the Design tab and look at the expert designers that they have that can help you plan your perfect yard. Visit ProgressivePlants.com today.